Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film a little wrap-up for the books that I've read so far for Reading Women Read-a-thon month. This read-a-thon that I've talked about the last few videos on my channel is something that's going on throughout the month of June. It's sponsored by Kendra Winchester, who is one half of the reading podcast Reading Women, and the read-a-thon is designed to help you catch up or start even the Reading Women Challenge, which is a list of 24 prompts designed to get you to read books by and about women, or more books by and about women. So I have done a TBR video and I've done a recommendations video. I'll link them both down below so you can check those out if you haven't already. But in the meantime, I thought I'd discuss the books that I've read so far in the month of June that fall into these prompts or into this challenge. And the first book is Terra Nullius by Coleman. This is a book by an Australian author, which is one of the prompts to read a book by an Australian or a Canadian author. And Coleman is actually has Aboriginal background as well, so she's Australian and Aboriginal Australian. And this book is a dystopian fiction book. I don't want to say too much about it because I went into it not knowing really anything about it other than it's dystopian and set in Australia. I had heard Leah over at the channel Hide and Seek talk about it and it sounded awesome, so I wanted to check it out. And I'm really glad that I went into it not really knowing very much about it because it made the book really interesting and exciting as I discovered more and more things about it. And I was quite surprised. After I got about 100 pages in, some things became clear to me that I had not expected. So I don't want to spoil any of those for you. If you like dystopian type fiction, if you are interested in a book that explores the impacts and the effects of colonialization, and this book has a lot of sharp things to say about colonialization and colonization and how white Europeans basically overtook different indigenous and Aboriginal populations around the world. I think this would be right up your alley, and I really love the Australian setting of this book. So that was an excellent read, one that I'm very much glad that I picked up. Then this book was not on my TBR, but I happened to see this book on the new release shelf at my local library. This Will Be My Undoing by Morgan Jerkins. Morgan Jerkins. This is an essay collection by Morgan Jerkins. That's her on the cover, and it is, the subtitle here is Living at the Intersection of Black, Female, and Feminist in White America. I had heard this book discussed, I know for sure I heard it discussed on one of the Book Riot podcasts and maybe somewhere else, I don't remember, but I was interested. I like essay collections. I like essay collections about political issues, social justice type issues, and I've read quite a few of them over the past few years. So I was interested to pick this one up. This was not overly successful for me. There were two issues that I had with this collection. I think Morgan Jerkins is a great writer and she has a lot to say, and her voice is certainly one that needs to be heard, but there's a lot of religious aspects to this that I just had a hard time with. I'm not a particularly religious person. I was raised in a Christian religion, but I am not a practicing Christian, and this book really delves into some of the more what's the word I want? Some of the more non-mainstream religions and some of their activities, and like faith healing and speaking in tongues and that sort of thing. And I'm a scientist and I have a hard time with those kind of things. I don't, anybody can believe whatever they want to. I'm not putting down anybody's belief system, but for myself, I just start talking back to the book in my head, and it's really difficult for me to stay focused. The other problem that I had with this book is that at some point within one of these essays, the author very specifically says, this book is not written for white people. I'm not speaking to white people. This book is for black women specifically, and black men too, I assume. But she specifically says this book is not for white people. So that was, I'm not gonna lie, that was really off-putting. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty open-minded person, and my mind is really open to reading, you know, about other people's perspectives and other cultures and other races and sexes and everything. I try to be really open in my reading, and for the author to very explicitly tell me, you know, I don't really care if you read my book or not. I don't really care to have a relationship with you, the reader. I just found that off-putting. So while I think that Morgan Jerkins is making a lot of very good points in this book, obviously I was not her intended audience, and that was really clear to me. So take that as you will. I also finished an audiobook in the last few days, and that was a classic written by a woman author, and I read the children's classic Heidi by Johanna Spyri, I can't remember now, and I don't have it with me to show you. So, but everybody knows the children's classic Heidi. It is, I believe, was originally written in German, and it follows, you know, a little girl who is an orphan and who gets taken to live with her grumpy uncle on top of a Swiss mountain, and he has sort of shut himself off from human society. And Heidi basically brings light and love back into his life, and she brings light and love to everyone that she meets. And it is, I loved Heidi when I was a kid. I always wanted to have a bed in a loft that was made out of hay and with a little window that I could look out into the mountains like Heidi had, and I wanted to have a grandfather who had goats that I could play with, and I wanted to be able to go with Peter the goat herd up to the top of the mountain every day with the goats and see the beautiful flowers and all of that. So I was a huge Heidi fan growing up. I saw the movie many, many, many times, and I wanted to reread this classic as an adult and see what I thought about it. And the thing that I thought the most about, I still love the story. I loved it on audio. The narrator did a great job. It's a great way to, I think listening to children's classics on audio, if it's something that you've read when you were a kid, is a great way to go, because it really gives you a different perspective of that book. But man, the adults in this story put a lot on Heidi. Like, there's so many adults in this story that like depend upon Heidi for their happiness, and they're not afraid to like let her know, like, if you go away, I'm just gonna be sad and brokenhearted forever, and I'm probably just gonna die. Like that's a lot of guilt to put on a little kid. I mean, in the beginning of the story, Heidi's 5 years old, so that was one thing that struck me. And the other thing that struck me about this book, again, with religion, is I did not remember that the story Heidi was so based in religious morality. So that was kind of a shock to me. It didn't really, I mean, it's all mostly, you know, be kind to each other, and if you pray to God, you know, good things are going to happen, and God's always going to look out for you, kind of thing. So it was very basic, you know, religious morality stuff. So it was fine, but it was surprising to me just because I didn't remember that even existed in the story of Heidi. So I really enjoyed listening to that, and that was also another prompt to read a classic by a woman on the list. And then another book that was not on my TBR to start with was another book that I found on the new release shelf at my local library. And I'm going to blame, I've heard about this book a lot. It's been on BookTube. Many, many, many people have talked about it, but I'm specifically going to blame Sean the Book Maniac for me picking this up, because he has been after me to try a Maggie O'Farrell. He's read a few Maggie O'Farrells and liked them, and I love hearing him talk about them on his channel, and it really made me want to pick up a Maggie O'Farrell. And when I saw this one, I thought, I'll pick it up, because this book fits one of the prompts for the Reading Women Challenge for the a book about chronic illness written by a woman. So this is a memoir. It's basically, the subtitle is 17 Brushes with Death. And it is 17 different little essays, or some of them are so little, some of them are longer than others, but 17 essays in which the author recounts her near experiences with death. And some of them are more serious than others. I mean, some of them are a little bit of a stretch, but some of them are extremely, extremely serious, and the author was very close to death. And Maggie O'Farrell can write. That is no doubt in my mind about that. I started this book after lunch on Sunday, and I finished it in the early evening on Sunday. I did not want to put it down. I loved it. This was not a collection that I could, you know, read an essay and stop. I had to keep going. I wanted to know what the next thing was going to be. The very first story is, or not story because it's a memoir, the very first piece in here details Maggie O'Farrell's brush with a murderer when she was, you know, a late teens, working away from home for the first time on a secluded mountain trail. Meets a guy, the guy that she had met earlier in the day on the trail is laying in wait for her later on along the trail, and for whatever reason she was able to get away from him. And that book was so terrifying. Like, I have been on woodland trails by myself, and the idea of this happening to me, like, totally freaked me out. And then there's another piece in here where Maggie O'Farrell talks about as a child she had very serious neurological illness, and she couldn't move for a while or speak or in any way, you know, she could cry and, you know, kind of yell and things like that, but she couldn't communicate clearly and she couldn't move. And they put her in a CAT scan, but they don't really tell her what they're doing other than to tell her that she can't move. And of course a CAT scan is extremely loud. It basically sounds like, you know, it's gonna blow apart and you're gonna blow up with it. And I had a very similar experience to that when I was 9 years old. I had surgery on my feet when I was 9 years old, and before I had surgery I had to have CAT scans done, and they did not tell me what it was going to be like, and they just told me that I had to lay perfectly still or I was going to have to do it again. And they put you in this thing, and then everybody leaves the room and you're all by yourself, and you just have you have nobody to ask what's happening or anything like that. And unbeknownst to the folks who were doing the CAT scan, I was a good reader. And there was a big sticker on the side of the CAT scan machine that warned that, you know, it was a danger and explosive and all this kind of stuff. And then the loud noises started up, and I was totally convinced the thing was blowing up and I was going to die. But yet I couldn't move and run out of the room or get up or anything because I was told not to. And so to read her experience with the CAT scan machine, which was so similar to my own experience and was so deeply frightening to me as a child, and I never have really heard anybody talk about it or describe it in a way that was similar to the experience I had. And to read that on the page, it was so moving to me. It was just, it really struck home. And then the last story in this, last essay in this collection is about Maggie O'Farrell's daughter, who has an autoimmune disorder and is allergic to, like, literally everything, and has all these issues, and just the heartbreak of being a parent to a child who is suffering so severely, and without being able to alleviate that suffering. I just can't even imagine what that's like. But the emotions that Maggie O'Farrell is able to bring forth in the reader just by her writing, and I just felt all the feels from this collection, and I love it so very much. And I'm so thankful that I found it at the library and I picked it up. And thanks to all of you booktubers who have talked about this book, and it really drove me to read it, and I loved it. So that's what I've read so far for Reading Women Month, and I'm reading a few more books right now, so I'll have more to talk about before the month is over. I hope you're all reading some great books by women this month too, and I will talk to you later.